You think men are hard to read? Wrong. A man can hide his words, he can fake his cool, but the moment a woman touches him in the right place, his desire betrays him every time. And here's the secret: when it's an older woman who does it, he's not just turned on, he's captivated, because she knows exactly what she's doing. Today I'm going to reveal 7 places where a simple touch makes it impossible for him to hide his feelings. But let me ask you this: have you ever noticed how a man stiffens, or leans in closer, or suddenly can't look away after a casual touch? That's not random, that's his body exposing him. And once you know these spots, you'll never look at touch the same way again. So pay close attention, because once you master this, you won't need to chase. He'll chase you. Before I share the rest, if you're enjoying this, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Which of these touches do you think men can resist? Spoiler, none of them. He froze just for a second and then he melted into her touch. Have you ever laid a hand on someone and felt them finally let out a breath they didn't even know they were holding? Like years of silence and waiting suddenly broke free in that single moment. There is something different in the way a woman touches when she has lived through heartbreak, through quiet nights, and through the slow, unseen work of rebuilding herself, piece by piece. It isn't about youth. It isn't about trying to tempt or seduce. It is about being present, about timing, about knowing what matters. Yet the world rarely ever speaks about that kind of power, especially when it belongs to a woman over 40, 50, or 60. They tell you your beauty fades, that your touch loses its meaning. They couldn't be more mistaken. If you've ever questioned whether your touch still carries weight, this is meant for you. What follows will show you the 7 places where a man cannot hide his desire when touched by a woman who truly knows herself. Not to control him, not to win him, but to remind both him and you of something genuine. So, if you have ever felt invisible, if you've ever doubted your pull, stay with me. And if this reaches something inside of you, go ahead and like, subscribe, or better still, leave me a comment. Tell me, have you ever touched someone and felt the shift inside them? The back of the neck holds more than people realize. It is quiet, often ignored, but when touched in just the right way, something changes. It is where tension hides, where a man tries to keep himself composed, where he wears the mask of being fine. But it is also the very place where that mask begins to slip, if you know when and how to reach for it. The neck is more than skin and bone. It is the bridge between mind and heart. It is where instinct collides with softness, and when you place your hand there gently, you're not only touching his body, you're speaking without words, telling him he can let go, that he doesn't need to pretend, that someone can see him clearly even in silence. Claire, 56, once told me about walking with someone new. They strolled by the beach, the sky dim, the air still. Almost without thinking, she lifted her hand and let her fingers rest softly on the back of his neck while he looked out at the sea. He didn't speak, but he stopped moving. His breath caught in his chest, and then he turned toward her, not with shock, but with something else, like he had been discovered. He didn't smile right away, but his eyes shifted, growing gentler, warmer, like for the first time he wasn't being measured but simply seen. And for a small moment the weight he carried seemed to fall away. That kind of touch doesn't demand attention. It doesn't ask for anything, but it says everything. It says, I know you're tired. You don't have to carry it all right now. You can rest with me. Sometimes the quietest touch in the simplest place is the one that cuts the deepest, not because it was planned, but because it was true. And when it is true, he feels it even if he never speaks it. The inside of a wrist holds its own kind of story. There's a softer intimacy in that part of a man's body. The skin is thinner, the pulse beats closer. It is one of those few places where the body whispers instead of shouting. Men don't often show that part of themselves, not unless they feel safe. A closed fist, arms folded, hands buried in pockets. These are the ways they guard it. But when a man lays his wrist open, palm facing up, It's more than comfort. It's a sign, a small opening that says, I don't have to shield myself right now. Luisa, 61, told me something that stayed with me. She had just lost her brother. The funeral was heavy, filled with silences where words couldn't reach. Her husband had been distant for months, both of them walking around each other like shadows. But at the reception, she reached for his hand. She didn't squeeze it. She didn't speak. She just held it, resting her thumb gently on the inside of his wrist. At first he stayed still, but then it happened. His breathing shifted, his fingers softened, and when he finally looked at her, for the first time in weeks she saw gentleness instead of pressure. She didn't fix their problems that day, but she touched something real inside him, something buried. That's what the wrist holds, not power, not control, but access. When you touch him there, not to direct, not to grip, but just to be with him, he feels it. Maybe he won't notice in his mind, but his body notices. His heart beats differently, stronger, even if he won't admit it. Sometimes the most powerful action is simply saying, I'm here, I see you, I don't need anything more, and often that's all he's been waiting to hear. The lower back carries instinct. A touch there is simple, often unnoticed by others, but deeply felt by the one receiving it. It isn't loud or demanding, it doesn't control or claim, it only says, I'm here beside you. For a man, that small space at the base of the back is where alertness meets trust. He may not realize it, but when a woman lets her hand rest there, even for a moment, his body answers before his thoughts can. Diane, 48, once shared a memory. She was walking with someone new, city traffic buzzing around them, the light was about to change. Without planning, she gently pressed her palm against the small of his back as they stepped forward, steadying him so they moved together. He paused for half a second. His shoulders softened, and when he looked at her it was with quiet recognition, like he hadn't felt that kind of care in years. That simple gesture told him more than words could. It wasn't about control, it was about trust. Men don't often put that into language, but their bodies reveal it. The way they stand straighter, the way their breathing calms, the way they lean closer. Touching his lower back says, you're not carrying it all, you're not alone right now. And that truth doesn't just ease him, it pulls him closer. Not because you are trying to impress, but because you are steady, present, unafraid to walk alongside him. That kind of quiet confidence doesn't come from reading tips in a book. It comes from living, from noticing, from trusting your own instincts as much as his. And when he senses that, he may not put it into words, but he feels safer, seen, and even wanted. Not in the noisy way the world brags about, but in a way that stays with him long after the touch is gone. The jawline is another place where men hide. They tense it when they want to resist reacting. They clench it when they are holding back emotions too heavy to reveal. It becomes a symbol of control, of strength, of keeping it together even when everything beneath the surface is breaking. That's why touching it softly without any force can be one of the most powerful things you'll ever do. Not because it makes him weaker, but because it tells him he doesn't have to keep that mask on anymore. Emily once shared a moment she said she would never forget. She and her husband had fallen into one of those old, tiring arguments, the kind that never truly resolves and just circles back again. Days went by, silence filled the air like a heavy fog between them. One night as he stood in the kitchen with his back to her, she walked up quietly and reached for him. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask him to speak. She simply laid her hand gently on his jaw, touching him like she remembered the man he was before the walls went up, before the distance, before life had pressed them down. He didn't say a single word, but his body did. His movement stopped. His shoulders eased. For a few seconds he closed his eyes, as if he was letting himself be known again. That's what the jaw holds, not just pride or control, but pressure. The pressure to never crack, to always stay unshakable. And sometimes all it takes is one quiet touch to release that weight. When you reach for him there, You're not asking for words or explanations, you're offering permission. For stillness, for softness, for connection that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. He might not react right away. He may look away, clear his throat, or stay silent. But deep inside, something unlocks, because in that simple gesture, you're telling him something few people ever say. I see you. I see even the parts you're trying to hide, and I'm not afraid of them. And that, more than anything, is what helps him breathe again. Not because he's lost his strength, but because for the first time in a long time, he doesn't have to prove it. The inner thigh is where desire often waits quietly. It's not a place people usually mention outside of intimacy, but it holds more than just physical reaction. It holds anticipation. And not every touch has to lead somewhere further. Sometimes the strongest connection is in the pause, in the lingering, in the silence stretched between two people. This kind of touch doesn't shout or demand. It's light, intentional, and it doesn't ask for more. It simply says, I remember this part of you. I still see you with the same eyes. Julie once told me about an evening that surprised her. She and her husband were just having a simple dinner, nothing fancy, just a quiet night together. They sat side by side on the couch, plates in their laps, something soft playing on the TV. As he leaned forward to grab his drink, she placed her hand gently on his inner thigh for only a moment. No words, no deeper meaning added, but the way he turned to her, the way his breath shifted, the way the energy in the room changed without a single thing being said, that moment stayed with her, not because it led anywhere, but because it didn't need to. That is the secret of desire. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits patiently. And when a woman touches a man with intention, but without